This is Dominique Inkrot, a clinical social worker, and we're here to talk about dating anxiety. This is hosted by the Minds Journal, and we appreciate them having us on. So,
Yes.
why is dating anxiety important enough to talk about? And the answer is pretty straightforward. You look around at most adults, and the majority of them are in a serious relationship where they're married. Most people, that's one of their aims in life, is to establish a meaningful, important, and rewarding relationship. And where does that relationship start with? It starts with dating. So it's important to be able to date in a way that is effective in reaching your goal, which is to find somebody that's right for you. And anxiety can get in the way of that. And why would there be anxiety with dating? There's a lot of reasons, but just think about it. Dating involves a lot of vulnerability in the sense that you're being appraised and judged. And that is going to make most people anxious, especially because that type of appraisal can feel really personal. If you're in an athletic event, take that as a contrast. It may not feel quite as personal. It can hurt to be judged and, for instance, not win. But a lot of people won't see their athletic prowess as fundamental to who they are, their worth. And the same with other competitions, whether it's a gardening competition, a spelling bee, whatever. But with dating, it just feels very personal indeed. Um, so it's important to be able to deal with those anxieties, to be able to master them, not to get rid of them, because you're not going to get rid of those anxieties. Very unlikely. If you don't have any dating anxiety, it probably means that you just don't care about the other person that you're dating. Or it could mean that you've just given up. You've given up to such an extent that you're not anxious about it anymore at all. It's kind of like the guy who wears a short sleeve dress shirt and tie and a pocket protector. That's giving up. So, you need to change that. Or it could mean that you're a sociopath who really doesn't care about anybody. And so, you're going to be anxious. And the good news is if you're anxious, it means you're not a sociopath and you haven't given up and that you probably care about this other person. That's good news. The thing is to keep in mind is that you don't have to get rid of the anxiety in order to be effective at dating and have rewarding dates. You just have to master it. That's what athletes and performers and speakers, that's what they all do. Matter of fact, I remember reading a story once. There used to be a late night talk show host, Johnny Carson. He was a big deal. It was a while ago, but he was a big deal at the time. And he had been doing that job for a couple decades. And some people followed him one night before his show, and they decided to take his pulse just a few minutes before he got on stage. As well as about 2 hours before he went on stage. 2 hours before he went on stage, it was about 65 or 70. 5 minutes before he went on stage, his pulse had risen to 165 beats per minute. He was anxious, but he controlled it. He was the master of it. And it allowed him to still go out and give a good performance, enjoy himself, make a good living. This is all you really want to be able to do. You don't want to get rid of your anxiety. That's an unrealistic goal. You want to be able to master your anxiety. So we just need to be sure that we have our goals straight before we go any further. Now, secondly, we need to think about, when is I'm anxious? Because almost everyone's anxious, except for those three categories we already talked about. How do I know if my anxiety is a problem? Well, you look at three different things. Look at how severe it is. And secondly, look at how long it lasts. Like if you're on your fifth date with the same person, you're still anxious, then you probably have a problem with dating anxiety. And then you also look at your response to your anxiety. That's the third thing. So if your response is way out of proportion. That you find yourself double checking your appearance 20 times before going out on a date, and you find yourself obsessing and ruminating over what you'll say and all. Yeah, then it's probably an issue for you, and you should think about working on it. Now, the question I could hear some of you saying is, yeah, I've got a busy life. Why would I want to work on that? And the reason you want to work on it is because you want to have productive dates. I don't know, it sounds as though I'm an organizational psychologist, which I'm not. But you do want to have productive dates, by which I mean you're able to date people. That's part of the selection process. So you're picking people and then going out with people who are likely to be the sort of person that eventually you'll have a meaningful connection with, a deep connection, and perhaps even a long-term meaningful relationship with. Um, but if you're extraordinarily anxious about dating, that's going to lower your odds of getting there. It will. Just think about this for a minute. Um, Anxiety can elevate performance to a degree, but when it gets too extreme, it degrades performance. Anyone who's taken an intern psychology class has read about that, and anybody who hasn't taken that class just knows it because it's commonsensical. And so, if you have extreme anxiety, it's getting in the way of you being able to have good dates. Then you're that sort of anxiety is probably going to show up in ways that, like the following. If you normally have a good sense of humor, it's probably going to be pretty well squashed because of your anxiety. Um, if you're a good conversationalist, that skill is going to diminish as well. Um, Another thing, it would be your judgment. Because as you're out there, and you may feel as though you're being judged and evaluated, but keep in mind, you're judging the other person as well to find out whether they're a good date. But your judgment is likely to be impaired if your anxiety is extremely high, right? It could be extraordinarily impaired. You could kind of have the same judgment that a blind golfer would have shooting 18 holes. You're going to miss most of the time. So, for all those reasons, if your anxiety about dating is high, it's worth taking a few simple steps to find solutions. Unfortunately, that's what we're going to talk about in just a little bit. But before we talk about that, because it does take a little work, and if you're going to work, you need to have a why, right? If you're going into the gym and you're working out, you have to have a goal that motivates you enough to keep going to the gym. And the same thing is true here. You have to have a why that's big enough to make you face this anxiety and put the work in, get things done, and move forward. And so, what we want to turn to next is helping to provide that why, because we can talk about the great things that will happen if you learn to master your anxiety, and that's part of the why. But the other part of the why that's just as important is what might happen if you don't master your anxiety about dating? What are some of the possible consequences of that? And for that, uh, Dominique is going to talk. And I'll chip in a little bit from here and there.
And so the thing is, a lot of bad things can happen when anxiety goes unchecked, right? I work with a lot of couples as well as individuals, especially younger women. And a lot of the trouble that people tend to get into, whether they're single and dating and trying to find a partner, or if they're already in a relationship and struggling, a lot of times those challenges come from anxiety that's gone unchecked. And that's because we can think of anxiety like an alarm. It's sending you an alert that there's some kind of problem or some kind of threat or danger. And with any kind of anxiety, say you are hiking and you see a rattlesnake, you're likely to try to avoid that threat that your anxiety has warned you about. And that's a natural response. And in situations where there's a physical danger, that's a helpful response. But when it comes to dating, avoiding is not a helpful response. It's actually a very unhelpful, unproductive response that ends up getting people into a lot of trouble and often keeps them from having the kind of relationships they want, meeting the kind of people, and dating the way that they want to. And it can get them feeling very stuck. And the tricky part is a lot of times people don't know that their anxiety is causing these problems. They just know, I'm having trouble dating and it's very frustrating, or they're having relationship problems and feeling unhappy in their relationship because of some dynamics. So let's talk about how dating anxiety shows up. You might not realize it, that this is what's behind it, but this can happen. And if this is you and you can relate, drop us a comment and let us know if you resonate with any of these. So one common way that dating anxiety presents itself is someone who is single and dating but has a lot of anxiety about it. They will end up dating, but they only date people that they're not very interested in or don't care too much about. And this works with anxiety because it creates a low stakes environment where you avoid a situation where you care too much about that person and might have to risk rejection. Another way that anxiety can play out in dating is when people sabotage their dates or their relationships. And that can look like a lot of different things. Of course, it can be showing up late to dates, it can be not putting your best foot forward, it can mean, being intentionally rude or critical and just a little bit off putting on dates, or even if you're already dating someone and in a relationship, sometimes people will sabotage that, often unwittingly, and it helps them to have a reason for why that date or that relationship doesn't work out. Because, if you go on a first date with someone and you're intentionally not too careful about showing up on time, you let yourself be a little late, maybe you don't really get ready, maybe you don't put a lot of effort into the conversation, then if that person doesn't ask you for a second date, you don't have to think, oh, that stings a little, they didn't like me. You can blame it on the fact that you were late or that you didn't put a lot of effort in. Another way that people do this is kind of the flip side of, it seems like the flip side of avoidance, but people can put up a false front on dates, which means it's not the same as putting your best foot forward, but it's when you go on a date or you're in a relationship and you try to present yourself like someone that you're not, so that you can try to gain acceptance. Meaning you look at the person you're on a date with or the person that you've been dating and you think, what would they want? What is the person that they want to date? And how can I pretend to be that so that they will stay with me? And that avoids the vulnerability that is inherent with really authentic, honest dating, and prevents you, or it seems to prevent you, if you're in that situation, from feeling rejection if things don't work out with that person. Anxious daters also sometimes will avoid dating altogether, but other times they'll avoid specific elements of dating that cause them a lot of anxiety, such as emotional intimacy or commitment or that vulnerability of showing their true self. And so sometimes anxious daters who are really very anxious will be the people that seem commitment phobic, and they'll preemptively end healthy relationships so that they don't have to get to that next level of seriousness in the relationship where they might have to let their partner get to know them a little better, and they might risk opening themselves up for more rejection because they've gotten into a more serious, more committed relationship. Other times, if they're not quite in that position yet to be, a commitment phobe, they'll be just canceling dates or turning down second dates, even though they like someone, because again, that prevents you from having to risk the rejection of the relationship going further.
Dominique?
Yes.
Yeah, let me jump in for just a second, if you don't mind. I think related to that are the folks who things are going really well and then they become bored with the person.
Mm-hmm.
Who used to be, one or two dates before, just sort of head over heels, an ideal date, and then they become bored with them. And I've worked with people who do that, and they do it consistently, and I think it helps them. It's an unconscious, it's a little deeper issue, but it helps them avoid having to take the risk of getting really close and vulnerable and intimate with somebody who means a great deal. Is that something
Yes.
you see as well?
Yes, many times. Because again, it prevents them from the risk of disappointment. Because even though dating can be very frustrating when someone is single and dating and looking for that person that they find who's the right match for them and that they can
Right.
settle down with, that can be painful to want that and not have it, or to be trying to find that and not finding it. But I think people also instinctively, even if unconsciously, know that there's a potentially greater pain to be had if they find that and then lose it. And so to avoid finding a relationship that is healthy and happy and has that sense of intimacy and being known with someone who knows you and accepts you and cherishes you for who you are, and
Yeah.
then risking losing that, they would rather avoid that altogether by allowing themselves to become bored with someone who really is a potential good match.
Yeah. They can become bored and just sort of fade out, or sometimes they
Mhm.
go all Miley Cyrus wrecking ball. And
Yes.
I would sing the lyrics, but we don't have time.
No.
But
Better for everyone if we don't.
it's probably better for everyone, yeah. But they then just sabotage. Okay, well, I just wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah. And then of course, like I've been mentioning, this anxiety can come up when people are single and dating more casually, getting to know people and trying to find someone to have a relationship with. But it can also persist even when someone gets into a relationship, or some people will get into a relationship and then develop anxiety, or it worsens. And so then that can look different for some people. For some folks, they will get into the relationship and they will either have had anxiety or develop more anxiety through the course of the relationship. But if the relationship is not good and there's signs that it's not the right match, things aren't healthy, it's not a person they should be partnered with, the anxious person might be anxious about how hard of a time they had getting into that relationship and finding that person, that they accept that unhealthy, suboptimal relationship and stay in it, rather than speak up about things they don't like, or even end the relationship because they know it's not the match and not the one. And that's kind of like not just kissing a frog, but then keeping the frog when you know it's a frog, like in the story of the Frog Prince, an analogy that I obviously like. That's my brand. But indiscriminate dating, basically, when you're continuing to date someone that you know isn't right for you, or that you know you don't have romantic interest in, again, it feels safer, but it is actually avoiding the true form of dating that is going to get you what you want, which is that healthy relationship where you know someone deeply and personally, and you are known in turn by them. And so sometimes people also, as part of putting up that false front, they'll end up doing things that they think will make them more attractive to dates or more attractive to their partner. And they'll end up engaging in behaviors that are not healthy in and of themselves, even outside of the impact on the relationship. Sometimes they'll drink more. Sometimes they'll be more physically intimate. Sometimes they will take up hobbies that they truly have no interest in, and just put a lot of time and energy and even financial resources into adopting this lifestyle or habit or persona that they think will make them attractive to someone that they're dating, or that they'll these elements of a contrived personality or lifestyle that will inspire the person they're with to stay with them. And when that's coming from a place of anxiety, where you're thinking, please don't leave me, what can I do to keep you here, how can I you know bend and reshape who I am into something that will make you stay, that is neither healthy nor helpful toward your end goal of being in a relationship with someone who knows you and accepts you and loves you for who you are, not for who you pretend to be.
There's an interesting balance that people have to strike, I think, between showing some interest in things they wouldn't normally be interested in because they care about the person, and showing interest because they just want to they want to stay with the person. And I think what you're talking about is where it's not just showing interest, it's showing interest in pretending that your interest goes beyond the fact that they're interested in it. So yes, I'm interested in it for you, but acting as though because your date loves Hummels and has 1,000 Hummel statues in their apartment, that you too are a Hummel fan.
Yes.
Right. You've gone over a lot of things, and I think you have a few more even. Is there a place? It's just there's a lot of good stuff here. Is there a place where people can go to get the list of things
Yes.
that you're talking about on your website or something like that?
Yeah, I've got lots of articles about dating and about dealing with anxiety in dating, or these potentially destructive behaviors. And you can go to quitkissingfrogs.com to find my articles and the links to my podcast, which recently launched and has some content about this, and will have a lot more because that's what I talk about, is dating and relationships.
So what was your? Could you repeat your website?
Yeah, it's quitkissingfrogs.com, and that should be linked in the live stream notes for people.
Oh, that is terrific. Oh, we should remind anyone who's watching, if you have a question, feel free to type it in, and when we're done, we'll be sure to answer it.
Yes. And so the bottom line when it comes to how anxiety will negatively affect your dating life is that it's going to either make you avoid things that are good for you and helpful toward your goal in dating, or it's going to make you do things that are unhelpful or destructive towards your goal, such as pretending to be someone you're not, feigning interest or sincerity in things that are not sincere interests for you. Or it will lead you to putting up with things that are unhealthy from other people. And that can be a really big landmine that some people walk into with their anxiety when it's unchecked. If they are allowing their insecurity to cause them to change their standards so that they're accepting behavior from the people they're dating that is rude or disrespectful, or it goes across the whole spectrum all the way to abuse. But before that, there's a lot of behaviors as well that people put up with that they shouldn't. If someone's treating you like a dirtbag, because that person is a dirtbag, if someone is confident and not struggling with anxiety, it's usually easy to tell that person who's treating you poorly to go pound sand and then you go on your way. But if someone's very anxious, it can be harder because you feel like there aren't as many options out there, or you think maybe you deserve that, or maybe that's just the behavior you need to tolerate so that you can have more dates, and that you think, well, I guess the other parts of this person might balance it out. You look like you have something to say.
Oh, no. I was enamored with the psychological jargon of dirtbag and pound sand.
Oh, yes. Well, we keep it salty.
Salty. You're keeping it real.
Yes.
No, it's good.
Yes.
It's good stuff.
And the thing with all these behaviors is often people don't realize that they are doing that because of anxiety, and they don't realize that their deep anxiety or insecurity is what's driving these choices in dating or even in life in general. And then eventually over time, those behaviors get repeated and they become a pattern, and then it becomes second nature, and you start living in such a way where your anxiety is the driving force in your dating life or in your relationship. And that is not productive, and that's not going to get you to the healthy, happy relationship that most people want. And it is certainly not going to help your mental health.
I guess the question is, I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking,
yes.
The question is, so, drum roll, How do you change this?
Yes.
How do you address dating insecurity? Um, would you like? I think
Yeah.
we can both talk
Tell us a
about
bit
that.
about that.
Pardon me?
Do you have any ideas on how to address
Oh
that?
well, I do. I'm more interested in hearing your ideas, but one of the things that strikes me is that I so often see in people is that they say, I'm going to start doing A, B, and C, which all involves dating. I'm going to put myself out there more. I'm going to say yes more. I'm going to go to, gatherings, whatever it may be, once I don't feel so anxious. And that just doesn't work. That's kind of like saying, I'm going to go to the gym once I feel more fit. No, that's reverse. You're going to go to the gym,
Not
then
gonna
you're going to
happen.
feel fit. When you first go to the gym, you're going to feel really miserable. It's going to hurt. You're going to ache, and you're going to, the first couple of weeks, probably think, this isn't working. All I'm feeling is tired and achy. I thought it was supposed to make me feel energized and strong. So, yeah, I think you have to realize the anxiety has to be faced head on. There are ways to do that that make it easier or harder, but anxiety has to be faced head on. Um, and if you keep in mind that most of the best things in life are on the other side of a door, guarded by anxiety, then it can motivate you to go and smack anxiety in the face, push through that door, and get what you would like and what you would enjoy. So you have to face that anxiety. I I think of a woman I saw who she was a young woman out of college though. She'd grown up in a horrible environment, really horrible. Um, One parent had abandoned family. The other parent was there, but was kind of absent because of addictions and all. So as she grew up, she learned a lot of lessons, false lessons about her self worth and value. And she used to tell me that, and she was very successful professionally, very smart, successful um, in her career, successful financially. But she said, I'd feel sorry for anyone who would be willing to date me. And but she felt that at gut level sadness that she didn't have anyone in her life who she was close to and who she could share it with. Um, and it was just incomprehensible to her that she would put herself out there and risk rejection in order to uh, obtain that goal because the goal seemed so far fetched. Um, but as we continue to work together, I won't go into all the details. That's not the point. The point is, she eventually changed her mind, and she allowed me to help her um, get situated with online dating. Yes, I was her online dating coach. Yes, uh, I don't recommend that most people hire somebody who's in their 60s to do their online dating coaching, but it worked. It worked. And but here's the important thing: the first few weeks, um, she didn't get much of a response at all, and it was really devastating. And she'd come in and kind of blame me and say, this is your fault. I feel even worse. This just confirms it. But the important part is she hung in there. It's like the person that keeps going to the gym, keeps going to the gym. Yeah, I hurt, I ate. This really sucks, but keeps going in. And eventually, people started to respond to her, and then she started to find people that she wanted to go out with. And some were frogs, but some weren't. And eventually, she found a really wonderful person who she had a very long-term relationship with. Enjoyed it tremendously, and long after our work was done, I was talking to her because she called about something. And I asked her, I said, by the way, when we were working together, at one time dating was a real issue for you. You're very anxious. How's it going now? And there was a pause and she kind of laughed. She said, you know, I'd forgotten that that's one of the things we focused on because that's not an issue at all now. So my point
Mhm.
is that you just have to push through the anxiety. You can't wait for that to go away first. You have to push through it. So long story, but
Yeah.
there you go. So
And
I'm sorry, what's that?
it sounds like it was like an investment where she made those payments in the beginning of enduring the discomfort, and
Right.
then over time she saw dividends. But it wasn't until the long run that she could see quite how big her investment had grown.
Yeah, that's exactly that's a good way to put it because it fits so much of life, right? Whether it's
Mhm.
learning a trade, your
Yeah.
education, um, fitness, learning a musical instrument. The initial investment
Mhm.
is the hardest investment, and it takes time before you see a return on your investment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so some practical ways to
Mhm.
move forward if you have a fear of dating.
Yes. Well, one thing that would be important, just as a to preface, is sometimes anxiety can be due to deeper causes. Sometimes people have anxiety that is so severe that it's interfering with other parts of their life outside of dating, or it's affecting their dating so much that they do need help from a professional. Other times it's linked with depression or past trauma. And that's your scope of expertise. I don't know if you want to give people your website since you deal with trauma and mood disorders.
Oh,
So,
sure. Yeah, it's forresttalley.com. So it's just FORRESTTALLEY.com. Yeah, and you can find information uh, on my website if you just go there. So, so there's those big ones, but how about some of the most common ways to push back that don't involve seeing a
mhm,
therapist, don't involve having a drink with a
mhm.
shrink?
Rehearsing would be a good one. If you are really anxious about, say, the conversational part of dating, if you struggle with knowing what to say on a date because you get very nervous when you're, sitting in front of someone that you find attractive and that you like and that you're hoping they like you, and you just are completely lost for words, it means you got to practice talking to people, not just on dates, not just
Mhm.
people that you like or are interested in, but just talking to people in general. It's like muscle memory. The more you practice making conversation, especially if you're making conversation with someone you don't know. So, making small talk with the cashier, talking to the person next to you in line at Starbucks, talking with another parent who's picking up their kid at school next to you, even talking to a coworker that you don't know very well. All of those things build your conversational muscle and help you
Mhm.
get more used to those skills so that you feel more calm when you're in a dating setting and having to apply those conversational skills.
That's a great
Mhm.
point. And what I really like is your emphasis on don't just practice talking as though you're on a date. Talk to anyone
Mhm.
because those skills are transferable.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they do build over time. So again, it's not something that you're necessarily going to get used to doing in one day, but each day that you practice this is an investment in your, you know, conversation account and building that skill. Just like each for an athlete, every workout is an investment in their athletic skills in their specific
Mhm.
sport.
Yeah.
If you're in dating and you're working on that, you want to rehearse. Same thing with any other element of dating if it makes you nervous. If talking to someone that or asking someone out on a date makes you nervous, or asking someone for their number when you meet them, got to start asking more people for their number. It really is
Yeah.
a numbers game in that way. And I know a guy who didn't struggle with this actually because he had such a refreshing and I would say very unique approach where he saw it as a numbers game, and any woman he met that he found attractive, he would ask for her number. And he was an older gentleman, so not every woman, especially the younger ones, would give him their number, but one or two out of every 10 did, and he thought that was a great ratio because he asked so many women for their number, and it worked for him because the numbers were in his favor with how open he was about asking women out. And that's not
He
necessarily
didn't
the
need a
approach for
Babe Ruth
everyone.
batting average. He was okay.
No, Exactly. So it's not the approach for everyone, but it is a
But
good
that's the idea.
lesson that
Yeah.
putting yourself out there more helps you get more used to the risk that comes with that and the nerves that might come with it. And soon enough, you don't feel anxiety and you just accept, yeah, it's a numbers game. Some people will like me, some people won't.
Because we have rehearsal, which
Hmm.
involves not just dating, but it could be talking to cashiers, etc.,
Hmm.
waitresses, waiters, etc. We have reframing, as in, hey, this is a numbers game.
Hmm. Yep.
I'm not looking to win every time. What else? What else would you suggest?
Coping skills, finding coping skills to help yourself be less anxious, like your example of Johnny Carson, things that can help bring that heart rate down when you're physically anxious. Do you have any
Well,
that you like?
yeah, it's the tried and true. It's kind of boring, but it's the diaphragmatic breathing. So it's taking a deep breath, but it's sometimes called a belly breath. It's where when you take a deep breath, your stomach actually goes out, not your chest, your stomach. And the importance of that is it's that your diaphragm is pulling down. That's making your stomach go out. Why do you care if your diaphragm's being pulled down? Because it stimulates the vagus nerve. Vagus
Hmm.
nerve is part of your parasympathetic nervous system. It's the brakes. It starts to slow things down
Hmm.
versus the sympathetic nervous system. So you want to do this diaphragmatic breathing, and you can go online. Um, I have some links somewhere on my website. You may on yours, but it's not hard. Just Google diaphragmatic breathing, and you practice it. You practice it at home, and then when you're getting ready to go on a date or ask someone on a date, you take a few of those deep breaths, and that's really helpful for a lot of people. But the
Hmm.
other thing that's helpful, and most people um, I suggest this so often in my practice, and I can tell you probably 3 out of 10 actually use it, probably 6 out of 10 try, but of those, half of them end up saying, no, I don't want to do it. But that's meditation.
Hmm.
Practice meditation 10 to 15 minutes a day. Um, and what it'll do is it'll lower your overall anxiety. And it'll also, you'll be able within that meditation time to come up with visual images or cues that you can also use at other times of the day to lower anxiety and stress.
Hmm.
So, diaphragmatic breathing, meditation, those are two simple ones. How
Yeah.
about you? Any other
Um,
different strategies you
I th-
do?
I think those are great. Anything that lowers your overall stress levels, like you were saying, with a daily meditation practice. I know people who do the meditation videos. They just look them up on YouTube. Other people use an app like Calm or
Oh,
Headspace
yeah,
for guided
right.
meditation.
Or reverie, yeah.
Yep. Other people like doing yoga or kind of a movement meditation practice. For other people, it's prayer. But anything that lowers your overall anxiety, it helps because if you think of anxiety like a bucket, then when you're feeling really anxious about something, it means the bucket's overflowing. So you can stop the
Hmm.
bucket from overflowing by stopping the flow of water, but that's pretty impossible as a human who's alive. You're never going to stop encountering things in life that will make you a little anxious. So the best way to keep your anxiety bucket from overflowing and overwhelming you with a flood of anxiety is to lower the level of water in the bucket. And doing daily meditation is a good way to let out some water from the bucket every day and keep that overall level lower.
Good idea.
Um, Other things you can do is try to take control of the time and place of your date if you can. Pick a place and pick a time that's more comfortable for you and doesn't make you as anxious. So if going to dinner and sitting across from someone new for an hour or more and talking makes you really anxious, suggest something like going to a movie, going to a park, going out for a cup of coffee. Um, Maybe go for decaf because caffeine can affect anxiety. Um,
So what you're talking about is if somebody asks you out and says, "Hey, how about we go to the movies?" and you want to go with them, but you just don't want to go to the movie. You're thinking that'd be, or let's go to dinner, and you're thinking, no, that's too much
mhm.
time. The person who's being asked out then can take control.
Well, yeah, you can. It's a little trickier when you're being asked out, but you can suggest other ideas. And if you are the one doing the asking, it's obviously a lot easier.
Yeah,
Just pick where you'd like to go. Um, but when you're the one being asked, it's usually easy enough to suggest something, and you can do it in a positive way. You don't have to say, going to dinner with you makes me really anxious. Can we please do something else? I'd feel more comfortable going to the movies or going bowling. You can just say, um, hey, I was actually thinking, it'd be great fun to go bowling. There's this cool place, in town. What about that? And suggesting it in a positive way, again, helps you to reinforce that more lighthearted, calm, casual tone that is going to help you start to feel that way as long as
yeah.
you continue acting.
Well,
So,
and I'll just tell you from a guy's perspective, if a guy asks to go out for dinner and she says, without having to explain herself or apologize, says, "Wow, that sounds great. I would love to spend time with you. But how about we go out for a cup of coffee? That,
mhm.
that sounds good to me." A guy who's offended by that and doesn't want to go out, that's probably a guy you don't want to go out with anyway,
Yes.
because that's pretty insecure. A guy who's really interested is going to say, "Okay, well, I'd rather go to dinner because
Mhm.
I get to spend more time with you. But if it's coffee, sure."
Yeah.
Yeah. So part of this is when you're talking about taking control, really, you're going to have to be assertive.
Yes, which can be one of those skills that takes practice. So, again, it's something to practice in other areas of life as well if you're
Yeah.
generally not an assertive person. But part of that assertiveness also comes from, or is, essentially, if you're looking at it from the 30,000 foot view, comes from knowing what you want, knowing your deal breakers and your deal makers, as I call them, and knowing what's important to you and letting those important values drive your dating decisions rather than letting anxiety drive your dating decisions. And I have an article about all about deal breakers and deal makers on my website. If you don't feel like you have a good grasp on what is important to you in dating, that can be really helpful to think about and reflect on and distill down. But like Dr. Talley was saying, if someone's matched with you on a dating app, let's say, and then they ask you out for dinner, and you say, "That sounds great. I'd really like to spend time with you, but how about we do coffee instead? I know this cool place." And that person who asked you out reacts negatively or gets upset by you not wanting to go with their idea of dinner, then you want to be confident enough in your own values and what you want, knowing what your deal breakers are and what your deal makers are, that you can identify that person's reaction as a bit of a red flag and then
Yeah.
proceed
Yeah.
accordingly. Whether you choose to go out with them and feel it out, but with your eyes wide open because you know a little bit more about them, having seen that reaction, or if you choose to just say, "You know what, it's a no for me, dog," in the words of Randy Jackson.
It's a no for me.
Yeah.
A little
Yes.
pitchy, and it's a no.
Yes. Yes.
I love that. We should probably, because it's been going for about
Yeah.
45
Yeah.
minutes or so. But do you have any one last way in which to push back against that type of anxiety? And again, yeah, going to your website, getting the list,
Mhm.
that'd be great.
Yeah. Address the root causes. If you need to see someone like Dr. Talley to deal with deeper causes of anxiety, whether it's a general anxiety disorder, depression, trauma, something like that, definitely address that. Take care of your own mental health. And that's a huge step towards dating healthily. Know what's important to you, know your deal breakers and your deal makers, um, and try to let your values drive your dating choices, not your insecurity or feelings of anxiety. And then rehearse, whether it's going on more dates or practicing different skills related to dating, like conversation, assertiveness, that kind of thing. Coping skills, like we talked about, diaphragmatic breathing. And again, you said your website has some
Yeah,
links there.
it
Um,
is.
yeah, visual rehearsal, meditation, anything else that lowers your overall stress bucket level. Taking control of the time and place of the date as best you can to help yourself be more comfortable. And then remembering that your feelings are going to follow your action. So you want to act the way you want to feel and just commit to making those investments in getting yourself to the feeling that you want by doing the actions that a confident, non-anxious person would do,
I
and
know you're
continuing to make those investments.
I know you're aware of this, but I think it's interesting
Yeah.
to point out that research shows that when people act more confident, and they measure that by holding your head up, a longer gaze, not a creepy stare, just longer gaze,
Yeah.
posture. I could go through a number of them, but when they look at that, they find that when people act that way, even they randomly divide people in two groups and have one act in a passive posture in a passive way, one have a posture that's positive, confident. They measure pre-post testosterone levels, men and women. Testosterone goes up in those who are acting confident. It has a physiological effect. It also has a psychological effect. And what you're pointing out is people also see you differently, and that's really extremely important. Okay.
Question
Well,
time?
I think there's some questions.
Yes.
Which so let's start with
here we have one from Terry. All right. So Terry's saying that she's 57 and grateful for life, but unsure of how to have a mature relationship, and has been brutally honest and may be working on changing that brutal honesty. I'm taking that to mean channeling it into a little bit more of graceful honesty and wanting suggestions. What are your thoughts?
I would say that you're on the right track, Terry. If you're getting the same response from your brutal honesty, it may be a couple of things. One is that it's not just honest, but maybe it's said in a way that is unintentionally a little unkind. That could be because of the tone. It could be because of the timing. It could be because of the specific words. Obviously, I wouldn't know, but it sounds like you're not intentionally being unkind. You're just trying to be honest, and I think that's a wonderful quality. However, as you get to know a person, you can be more and more honest about various qualities in their life, right? So if you don't know someone very well, and you see that they have maybe that they have a particularly quick temper, and you think that it's really destructive to their relationship with their kids, probably not going to say something about that because that's really personal. If you don't know them well and you just notice that they have forgotten one of their kids as they're leaving the zoo, then you're going to say something. Anyway, how well you know a person will influence how that honesty is taken, because what you have to first of all do in the relationship is win somebody's trust, so that they know when you're being brutally honest, you're not trying to hurt them, that you actually care deeply about them, and you're saying it from a place of concern and appreciation for who they are.
And that's a good point.
You would add to that, Dominique?
No, I think it's a great point that when you know someone more closely and you have a more intimate, emotionally intimate relationship, then you have sort of put in enough emotional payment into the relationship, or investment would be a better word. You've invested enough, so now you are a stakeholder and you have more reason to speak up and say something and share something that might be very honest and very personal, but it's only appropriate and usually only welcomed when you have also built that mutual trust,
Yeah.
and this
Yeah.
person also knows you in return.
Well,
So
one thing you can do, Terry, is if the people that you've been brutally honest with, and maybe they haven't taken it well, but if they're still in your orbit, you're still friendly with them. You can ask them, how could have I said that in a way that it wouldn't have hurt or it wouldn't have pushed you away? That can lead to some interesting revelations because they're going to tell you how they took it, what they thought was the motive behind it, etc. You're going to be able to say, well, that wasn't my motive, or if it wasn't, and so forth. Okay. It
another
says,
question.
Johnson says, whenever I'm going on a date, should I be cautious about any red flags?
Yes, you should be. It's the
Yeah, I
short
would agree
answer.
with you. Yeah, I would be cautious about red flags. The thing is, Kurt, if what you're finding is that no matter who you date, the roadside is filled with red flags, then you got to say, well, maybe this has something to do with me being overly vigilant rather than my date.
Yes. And sort of like if you were to go out driving for the first time and say it looks like every streetlight you're seeing is yellow. It might not be that all the streetlights are yellow. It could be, but more likely there's something with your vision. Either you're wearing colored glasses, you
Yeah.
have developed color blindness all of a sudden or something. And so knowing what red flags are and identifying them and acting appropriately based on that knowledge is really important. But it's also important to make sure you have discernment enough to know what is a red flag and what is not. Because it's very easy if you don't have that discernment to either miss red flags and not recognize them for the warning signs that they are, or to see things that are normal quirks and differences in people and mistakenly identify those as a red flag and then miss out on a potentially good date or relationship
Yeah.
because you've let that run you off too soon.
Good. That is a good point. And really, Kurt, this is one of the reasons why it's good to know your deal breakers, the things you have to have in a relationship, the things you cannot have in a relationship, because that'll help you judge, is this really a red flag? And so will if you have a friend, a wingman, so to speak, doesn't have to go on the date with you. That would be creepy.
Yes.
Unless it's
Very
a double
creepy.
date. You know, honestly, a double date could help you solve this problem, Kurt. Because if you have a wingman that you trust, then you're going to be able to compare notes about things. But even if you're not on a double date, you can go to somebody you trust whose judgment seems really solid and run it by them. You just need to, if it's happening again and again and again, say, is it me that's hypersensitive, as Dominique was saying, to certain things and just picking up and making too much of things? Or possibly, am I picking the wrong type of woman who has all these red flags? The red flags for you, maybe they're not for other people, right? So you gotta ask yourself that as well. And it really sounds kind of mysterious, like it's going to be terribly difficult to figure out. Most of the time, you're going to be able to figure it out. If you can't, consult with a coach, which is called a therapist. I'm not talking about a life coach. I'm talking about a real therapist, but they're going to coach you. They're going to be another set of eyes and ears to try to walk you through it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we have another question. It says, how can I be more cool and calm during dates? I always get anxious whenever I'm interacting with others. Well, welcome to the club. Lots of us experience that feeling. I experience that feeling, and I'm a therapist. I talk to people about their social anxiety for a living. So definitely not unusual, but it's good that you're wanting to change that, because that does not help you if you're letting that anxiety lead or get in the way of you interacting with other people, and whether it's making friends or meeting dates and developing a romantic relationship or whatever it is. And I think we talked about a lot of different ways you can do that towards the end of the presentation, we were talking about rehearsal, practicing relaxation techniques like diaphragmatic breathing, meditation, visualization, anything that reduces that anxiety bucket. I think another helpful thing to help you stay more calm when you're interacting with other people and just to ease that social anxiety, aside from the stuff we talked about already, is to think about those interactions like a tennis match. And this is something I was taught by my dad growing up, is that because I was a very socially anxious kid. But when you think about interactions with others like a tennis match as something where you're not the only one responsible for hitting the tennis ball back and forth over the net. You've got half of court, the other person has half the court. And so in an interaction, you don't have to worry about making sure that interaction or conversation goes perfectly. You just have to hit the ball back. And so thinking of it that way can take a lot of the pressure off, especially if you are feeling like you have to perform socially or manage a social interaction just right. Taking that pressure off by telling yourself, okay, I just have to hit the ball back. They'll take care of their part of the conversation, or it's up to them to take care of their part. And it's up to me to, listen to what someone's saying when I'm talking with someone on a date or a friend or a new acquaintance, and then stay engaged in the conversation by asking a question or telling them an anecdote about myself that relates, something to hit that ball back across the net to the other person's side of the court, so that they can then, one, they've learned a little bit more about you and they can share something else, and you keep the conversation going like a tennis match.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good explanation. And what often happens when you get anxious in the way that is it Pei Young? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Apologize if I'm not. But in the way that that's being described is often you'll start to watch yourself as you're on a date, and you're like your own audience observing, and it makes things very awkward and unnatural. So you want to be able to stop that, and get into the moment. And one way to try to do that is similar to what you were saying, Dominique, is to see this as a kind of a tennis match, a verbal tennis match, where you both are wanting to win. You both can win. But if you'll start to see your conversations and your dates as games that you're involved in, not as a review of your self-worth, or a commentary on your future, or a conclusion about yourself in the past, but just see it as an interaction. And honestly, that's a good reason to make a date short. Take control, make short dates. But see, can I get this person to talk to me about, and come up with a number of subjects. I want them to talk to me about how they grew up. I want them to talk to me about their family. I want to know what their future goals are, adventurous goals.
Their credit score.
I want to know
their
their
social security
score.
number. Just kidding. Don't ask that.
Okay.
Doesn't go well on a first date.
That's the advanced course that we teach on Udemy.
Yes. Yes.
But if you make it into a game like that, and you determine each time, you say, all I want to do is polish my skills and how to get somebody to feel easy and comfortable with me, so that they make these disclosures. It takes some of the pressure off you, and you're able to enjoy the date a lot more. So you can try that as well.
And I think what you said about making the other person feel at ease and able to open up is really key, because that, I think, is one of the most helpful perspective shifts and reframes that people can do when they're feeling social anxiety. Just pay attention to the other person, because when someone's feeling socially anxious, your anxiety is keeping you focused on yourself and thinking, what is this person thinking of me? How am I being perceived? How am I being judged? And the easiest way to shift that focus is not to tell yourself, don't think about that, because then that's all you're going to think about, but actually actively focus on something else. And listening to what the other person is saying is a great way to do that, because then you can, when you listen, you can truly respond to what they're saying a lot more naturally and easily than if you are halfway listening and then halfway thinking, what am I going to say? I have to make sure I seem interesting. I have to make sure I don't seem weird. I want them to like me. What should I say? And then realizing, oh no, they just stopped talking. I don't know what they said, but now I have nothing to say. And now
Yeah.
they're really going to think
Yeah.
I'm weird. Just
Yeah.
listen, focus on the other person. And that, you know, if you're truly staying in the moment and listening to what they're saying and focusing on them and trying to put them at ease, you'll find yourself being at ease as well. Oops.
Okay.
Well,
It looks like Clarissa finds these metaphors very helpful.
we do what we can.
Thank you. Thank you, Clarissa. So I guess that's it. We've pretty much gone through the questions, and we're at the end of our time. Unless there's anything else you want to add, I guess we bring the curtain down.
No, I think this was great. Thank you again to the Minds Journal for having us.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. I know we both like talking about this.
Yeah, we love talking about this. And again, I would encourage you, although we both write about this, and all Dominique really focuses on this, both on her website and on her podcast. If you want to give those one last time, and then we'll sign off.
Yeah, it's just quitkissingfrogs.com for my website, and that's the name of my podcast, Quit Kissing Frogs, on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you enjoyed hearing from both of us, definitely check out the podcast and subscribe, because Dr. Talley will be guest hosting on an upcoming podcast with me. So you'll have to subscribe if you want to find that.
I didn't even know that. Thank you.
Oh, surprise.
Okay. This was great. Thank you. Good night.
All right. Thank you. Good night.